What's up, guys? Loads for Footballtalk here. We had an incredibly thrilling foursome of Divisional Round games after pretty one-sided affairs in all but one contest of the first round of the NFL playoffs. I would have liked to get on here and talk about those final four teams, how they were able to come out victorious, and they deserve all the credit for taking advantage of opportunities presented by their opponents and not making those costly mistakes. But man, a lot more games on this stage are lost rather than won, and this past weekend perfectly illustrated that. Just looking at turnovers, the winning teams had a 10-0 advantage. So I decided to do this more in a podcast version, talk through those four games, and kind of vent about stuff that happened, whether it was head-scratching coaching decisions, mind-numbing turnovers, or unfortunately also infuriating calls or no calls by the refs. Again, typically I want to focus on highlighting positives and breaking down cool plays, which there certainly were, but let me be that guy for one day before we get to the conference title games and ultimately Super Bowl 59, which I'll have an extensive preview on a week prior to it. Of course, we have to acknowledge that the weather in most of these duels played a major factor, other than the Saturday night game at Detroit in the Dome. Not that I want to get into which side it favored necessarily or anything like that, but I do want to give a little bit more leeway to the individual players trying to do everything they can in those conditions. How the ball might bounce funny ways or just slip out of your hand, or it's just tough to keep your footing at times. Just to quickly bring it up, the umbrella under which I looked at those Sunday games, at least in particular. Let's get cranky and start with Saturday afternoon though. The Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs. A one-score game until midway through the fourth quarter, which the Chiefs always seem in control of for the most part. Although they didn't take advantage of chances to actually pull away, final score looked slightly better for Houston, thanks to an intentional safety taken by Casey's punter to burn some more clock. Chiefs 23-14. And let's start with special teams, because those were effective from the very start. They reared their ugly head a couple of times otherwise, and it practically ended any hope for Texans fans late. Nico Remigio takes the opening kickoff back 63 yards. Great job by him and the return team overall, but two really bad missed tackles on the Texans' end. Chris Boyd slings that guy down at the end of it and the ball pops out, but Casey jumps back on top of it. The guy who just made the tackle runs off the field as if he just won the damn game, throws his helmet down, which puts the Chiefs half the distance to the goal on top of it, and then he pushes his special teams coach in the chest. And then he continued to play teams for them. For a day to start like this and not make a statement by sitting his ass down was the first bad decision that really pissed me off. Then there was the missed 55-yard field goal, which never had a chance. It looks like the kick was going to be short either way. Really tough to make with the wind whistling through that stadium, but you have to be a little bit more aware of how it's going to carry that ball. And it ends up as one of the worst tries I've seen in the playoffs for a while, which of course they even had to settle for a long attempt because Stroud took one of his 8 sacks on the day, the snap prior to it, which we'll get to a little bit later here. The missed PAT was an absolute killer when Houston was about to tie the score at 13 apiece, but now you're down by 8 the next time you get the ball, and instead of trying to get in range for another long kick, that's not even an option really, and they go for it in the 4th and 10 from the KC 40, which they of course fail. And finally, just past the 2-minute warning, down 23-12, they have another field goal blocked, which could have at least kept the hopes alive if they somehow recover the onside kick. Chiefs overload the right side, and I think Leo Chanel actually gets both hands on the ball here, similar to the ending of that Broncos game the Chiefs somehow pulled out a couple of months ago. But we have to talk about the free plays where Mahomes does get the LeBron, Michael Jordan superstar calls that just shouldn't be part of the game, because this doesn't even have anything to do with protecting the quarterback anymore. First is flagged for roughing the pass against Will Anderson, who was playing with his hair on fire and would have gotten Houston off the field on 3rd and 8. It's definitely a hard hit, but the refs truly just go by the pure speed of the collision, since it certainly appears like it's a perfectly legal shoulder-to-chest hit. Instead, the Chiefs get a field goal on a drive. Then there's this play towards the end of the 3rd quarter, where Pat scrambles out to the right, decides to cut back inside. He's clearly established himself as a runner by that point, meaning there's no additional protection, and with 2 defenders converging on him, he takes this really late slide. You do see Henry Toto kind of lower his helmet, in part because he's reacting to Mahomes' movement, but there's no forcible contact other than between him and his teammate actually. That's a free 15 yards, and of course there was no actual flag on this play, but this is the perfect encapsulation of what we should all want to be outlawed from the game. In the 4th quarter, Pat escapes the pocket and now scrambles left. The defenders literally treat him as if he's a punt returner waiting for the ball, so you don't get flagged here. He intentionally delays when he actually steps out of bounds to bait the contact, flops, and even though there's no penalty, It could have easily resulted in one that should be 15 yards the other way, and you have to hope the rules committee looks at that this offseason. Pat throws a touchdown on the very next play, where he's almost perfectly horizontal to the ground. Great play, as Travis Kelce's waiting there, staring down the defender at his feet. So I absolutely believe the better team won here. It's not because the NFL is rigged. They just emphasize these insane rules to protect the star quarterbacks, and then they actually try to bend those to where they take on bigger risk of actually getting hurt. But away from the theatrics of it and back to the actual game now, and the thing that actually bothered me the most, the protection plans by Texans offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick were truly abysmal. They've had issues all year long, in part because individual guys just get beat on every other snap, but also in terms of how they communicate pre-snap, how they pass off simple twists and stunts. It's been catastrophic, and Saturday that was on display for everybody to see against one of the great defensive minds in Steve Spagnuolo. Kansas City had 8 unblocked pressures and as many sacks on the day, with CJ Stroud running for his life and diving for first downs. On multiple occasions, they used full-on slides away from Dalton Schultz in a 2-point stance, but that guy was left one-on-one with one of those edge rushers for Kansas City, which typically are built more on power. They also doubled with the back, working that way a couple times, but that extra blocker didn't even have an angle to actually help out. They missed some free rushes up the A-gaps. It was truly a showcase of how to not construct a comprehensive game plan. Just chip and release a tight end on one edge to help out the rookie right tackle, slide away from it, and then tell it back to firmly step up into that B-gap or curl up over the middle if nobody's there. You need those guys in the pattern, if nothing else than just for Stroud to be able to dirt it at the feet instead of taking costly sacks. I'm just kinda done with the Bobby Slowick experience in Houston at this point, which is wild to say considering what the conversation sounded like a year ago when he helped Stroud put together one of the great rookie quarterback seasons we had seen up to that point. He was more than equally at fault for his progress stagnating or even declining, where Stroud was not allowed to operate on time, and you see some uncharacteristic misses, but one of the game's most accurate passers. And he brought this guy over from San Francisco as part of that Shannon run scheme to give himself some stability, yet they finished 20th in rushing success rate last year, and then dropped on to 31st this year, with a veteran running back in Joe Mixon in place, not being able to adapt and maybe implement more gun run concepts to complement where a quarterback is comfortable at either. That's not even including the protection issues we saw all year long, and especially in this game, even if adding more pieces on the O-line is certainly something we need to talk about. Chiefs move on, anything but a convincing showing against a team with defined shortcomings on one side of the ball at least, but they always make the plays needed in the biggest moments. They rarely get outcoached on either side of the ball, and they've become masters at doing just enough to come out on top. Bringing us to the Saturday night game between the Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions, the biggest upset of the postseason, with upstart Washington winning 45-31 at the top-seeded Lions. First and foremost, Commanders rookie quarterback sensation Jaden Daniels was outstanding yet again. He consistently had answers throughout the day. When Detroit was bringing pressure, his offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury deserves a lot of credit for how they attacked man coverage, Jaden hanging back there allowing mesh concepts to develop, and really making it look easy in key situations. When 3 of 4 on 4th downs were gifted another free conversion, which I'll get to in a couple of minutes here, Daniels didn't allow any of the 11 pressures against him to turn into sacks, had a couple of nice keepers, De'Ami Brown having a day with that deep over route on Spear, where the corner's late to fall off, and a beautiful throw in a post across the face of the single high safety, Terry McLaurin breaking a tackle and taking a simple quick screen to the house, where they have the defense outnumbered to that side with a far bunch. But that is not what we're here for. Jahmyr Gibbs on the other side finished the day averaging 8.8 yards per touch, the most dynamic play on the field. The Lions had 12 plays of 15 plus yards and finished with an offensive success rate of 57.6%, which is 8% higher than the best mark for any team for the regular season, which they set themselves, and it was also higher than Washington's in this matchup. But they lost the turnover battle of 5-0, and Jared Goff probably had his worst showing of the season. Had that strip sack fumble in the red zone on the 3rd and 1, where they were about to go up 14-3, just too loose with the football, although I would have liked to see them just ride the running game there. And then just 2 really bad throws to close out the first half. First he has this perfectly clean pocket, and they try to hit these sit-down routes between the 2nd and 3rd level, but Goff just sails it over Tim Patrick's head, right into the hands of safety Quan Martin, who returns his 40 yards for a touchdown, and suddenly Washington is up by 10. Along with what objectively is a great play by rookie corner Max Sainristil to pick this off in the end zone, when Detroit should have cut the lead to a field goal again. But they get exactly what they want on that play. Commanders playing quarters, the safety to that side, drives on the in-cut in front of him, and now you have Jameson Williams one-on-one with the corner who's playing with outside leverage. Ball is behind the target when he should be leading him across the field. That's a killer. Plus, with 32 seconds left in the game, down by 14, so this ultimately probably was inconsequential. Goff serves this up on a silver platter for the Tampa 2 dropper Jeremy Chin. He does make him open the wrong way initially, but a great effort by the defender, and that's a ball you simply have to rip in there. But speaking of JMO earlier, he had my favorite and then also the dumbest play of the day. First he has the 61-yard touchdown on a reverse, which in a moment I called one of the most beautifully executed versions of it that I have ever seen. Credit to Terry Bridgewater for coming off a high school state championship as a coach to at least get in the way here for kind of a key block. Williams untouched, cuts across the grain, and starts celebrating at the 20-yard line already, flips on the end zone, and is lucky to not get flagged for a wild celebration, which his teammates actually come over to stop him. But then in the fourth quarter, down by 10, they call up a trick play where it looks like another reverse, and you have Jahmyr Gibbs wheeling up the right sideline, but Sandro still again is on top of it, and comes away with a fairly easy interception, which sets up another touchdown for Washington that basically steals the outcome of this one. And I promise you, every time they practice this, the coaching point was to either just throw it away if the back isn't wide open, or to take off because you don't want to get flagged for ineligible men downfield. So in no way should this ever have been attempted by any wide receiver, but that's the issue with guys like this especially. They believe they can make it happen, and JMO's going to let this go all the way. We can talk about some of the missed tackles on Detroit's end that allowed explosives against them, and the overall game plan to not play a little bit more zone coverage with how banged up they already were coming in, losing 3 more key contributors, including a horrible looking arm injury to Meek Robertson, but they were just limping to the finish line. So I just have to point out one moment, 4th and 2, only down by 3 to start the fourth quarter. I just don't know how this happens, getting caught with 12 men on the field in this situation, everyone's kind of scrambling, and you simply have to call a timeout there as soon as you see it, because you also get flagged just if the snap is imminent. That's inexcusable. And while this isn't a critique of the guys themselves, considering when they used that trick play and how they didn't continue to ride Gibbs on offense, as well as the defensive game plan overall, and the fact they tried to huddle against the Commanders' fast-paced attack, but they simply don't allow you to do that. It looked like Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn, as the 2 coordinators, weren't optimally prepared. Almost like 2 guys who had a bunch of virtual interviews for head coach openings over the last 2 weeks, when they should be focused on the task at hand. And I don't blame them, but rather the NFL in how they handle this process. We have enough examples now from years past how that can be a factor just because guys are trying to get the dream jobs eventually, and they simply weren't as sharp as usual in this case. Something has to be changed there. But again, all the credit in the world to Washington for pulling this off. Which brings us to Sunday and the division rivals in the Philadelphia Eagles hosting the LA Rams. Right off the bat, this is the game that I had the least problems with. If anything, the winning team bothered me more, with Jalen Hurts' inability to extend plays that didn't actually end up with him getting wrapped up for sacks that either killed drives or took points off the board. Especially the one in his own end zone at the end of the third quarter, which resulted in a safety when he could have easily just dumped it off to a wide open Saquon Barkley. The Eagles take this one 28-22, but it came down to the wire when it felt like this should have been wrapped up by halftime probably. Despite 2 breakaway touchdown runs of 62 and 78 yards for Saquon, the Rams actually finished the day with higher rushing success rate on offense, largely because of all the resources LA committed to stopping number 26. They started on split safety looks, so they wouldn't be out-leveraged by Saquon when he broke through the second level, but had to put everybody near the line of scrimmage later on, and that's when we saw that second one pop because of one simple mistake in the run fits where he left the frontside B-gap uncovered. And of course Hurts opened the scoring when all he had to do was slip through one tackle on GT counter bash, where the mammoth left tackle Jordan Mailata pulled around and didn't even have anyone to block. Kyren Williams regularly was able to press creases, allow his linemen and tight ends to cover up bodies, and squirt through for 8 to 12 yard runs, along with a couple of explosives on top of it. Only when the snow started to really affect the footing, and LA had to somewhat abandon the run game in the second half, they actually had trouble to move the ball. The Ringer Steven Ruiz had a great tweet on this when they hit that low, saying the Rams constantly felt like they were about 300 yards away from the end zone, along with a picture of Frodo and Bilbo from Lord of the Rings looking at Mordor from afar. What cost the Rams a chance to win this game were in Hurts and to some degree the play calling supporting that were holding the door open for them, were turnovers of course. They were able to avoid one early on, and they actually ended up resulting in a massive play for Demarcus Robinson, wresting the ball away from Isaiah Rodgers, with the pass kind of dying out a little bit down the post. That set up a field goal for them. But then we had the great punch up by defensive tackle Jalen Carter on the first play of the fourth quarter, working over his block and going straight for the ball when he gets to Karen on what looked like another nice rushing lane initially, and then the strip sack on Matt Stafford on 3rd and 10, the next time they get the ball. They actually do a good job of picking up that 6-man rush, paired with a chip on the left side with the tight end. But on the other end of the line, you have Rob Havenstein being too quick to get out of his kick set, just forcing Nolan Smith to take a wider arc around him. But reading the scouting report, that dude wants to win the corner, and he does so in a little long arm to speed conversion. Stafford slides away from it, and should have 2 hands on the ball, but it gets knocked loose, and Zach Bond recovers, another guy who had a monster day. Of course, Philly did help the visitors out a little bit, by inexplicably calling a bootleg with this version of Hurts that had already put on a brace and could barely move. So he easily gets run down by Kobe Turner, redirecting of the run action. And the Rams suddenly drive down once more after they had just matched the second long Saquon touchdown, making it all the way to the Philly 13, down by only 6. But that's when Jalen Carter calls game here. First with a massive sack, where if you look at number 89, Tyler Taylor Higbee, he runs a little pivot route back to the inside. His defender actually falls down, and if Stafford has time to throw this, at worst it's 1st and goal from the inside the 5, if not a touchdown altogether. But the young superstar D tackle comes free on what looks like a bust in protection as he slants inside and both the center and right guard turn away from him, expecting the other to pick him up. And then there's a little bit of uncertainty again, with rookie center Bo Limmer only deciding to mirror the defender once he's already won the gap. He gets a hit on Stafford, who needs the space to step into and drive this throw. Ball comes out inaccurate, and that's game. This wasn't something that we saw regularly throughout the day, but in the biggest moments, a young guy for LA made a mistake, while the one on Philly's side took over. And that's the difference, especially considering the caliber of players at this point, since losing the turnover battle 2-0 already gave the Rams minimal room for error. Saquon is a game changer, and even if you ball him up for most of the day, he can have those 2 or 3 plays that really break it back. And ultimately I thought the better all-round team advanced, but for them to do this with the quarterback being a definitive net negative, while Stafford is kind of still slinging it around, and I understand that you saw LA's linebacker get pushed around regularly, but they largely matched the level of physicality and intensity as a team, with Jared Worth backing up all the trash he was talking during the week and before kickoff. I thought they more than held their own, and are still kind of kicking themselves now probably for not taking advantage of the opportunity that they had, with Stafford moving into the twilight of his career. Bringing us to the final game of the weekend, the Baltimore Ravens at the Buffalo Bills. Bills win this massively anticipated matchup, featuring the 2 MVP favorites, 27-25. I would love to live in a world where we can come out of this game and see both quarterbacks are great. It came down to the final real play from scrimmage, and the backdrop kind of decided it. But if you logged on Twitter or X, mere 5 minutes after the conclusion of this one, you saw playoff Lamar discourse, and while I don't even want to encourage conversations around him specifically, I do have to start by addressing what we saw in this game. Not counting a kneel down just before halftime, Baltimore had 8 possessions on Sunday, they scored on 5 of those, and turned the ball over on the other 3. And let's not sugarcoat this, the fumble was bad. The play started with a high snap, Lamar tries to make something out of it, and instead of making sure he wraps up a slippery ball in these conditions as he's going down, it squirts out and Juan Millanilli takes it back for a touchdown. On the interception, he and Rashad Bateman simply weren't on the same page, as you hear a lot of times being said, because the receiver breaks off what on paper I'm sure is supposed to be a corner route as he tried to hollow the defender out in the flats. But because that single high safety isn't far enough over to the sideline, Lamar decides to lead his target vertically, and even though it's still not a great decision probably, as he would otherwise turn it into a jump ball most likely, it looks a lot worse than it actually was, especially since it seems like he's kind of just guiding the ball there. And if we look at the play from early in the very first drive, Buffalo bumps down one of the safeties for cover 3, Lamar rips that throw up the seam to Isaiah Likely for an explosive gain, so you see the idea at least behind what he's doing here. Lamar outdueled Josh according to all the advanced metrics, and did so on a high level of difficulty, even if he partially inflicted that onto himself, but I just can't stand that people feel the need to blemish this guy's legacy when he was lights out otherwise. It hurts my heart because he's been such a big piece for Baltimore during the Lamar era, but Mark Andrews had a game from hell. Of course, the two plays that stick out: one, the big fumble. I've seen people post screenshots about how he cuts across the field when he had so much space right in front of him, although that certainly doesn't reflect the momentum of all bodies on the field. But Terrell Bernard, truly all he does is punch at the ball and jumps on top of it, kills that drive, when he would have otherwise already been in field goal range pretty much, down by 5. In the failed 2-point conversion, Lamar tries to sort of flip it there because he's trying to be safe with it, but that's a ball you simply have to catch. Andrews seems a little bit worried about sliding out of bounds, and he can't bring it in on both attempts. And that's a result of something that we saw earlier when he dropped another easy pass, so from that point onwards he decided to body catch everything. And as we think back to the first drop, it's actually a killer as well, because again, they should have been in the red zone, but that hard ball in the inclement weather conditions goes off Andrews' hands, and on the very next play they have that botched snap that led to the Lamar fumble, where he's trying to make something happen. Of course, another failed 2-point try earlier that would have tied the score was huge as well, as they end up losing by exactly that margin. Great setup on sort of a league play to hit Isaiah Likely, but Matt Milano jumps up and is able to just bat it away. The referees certainly made sure that they got their time to shine with some truly wild calls for anybody at home watching. First, of course, there was the pass interference call against former Bills Pro Bowl corner Trey White, where it looks like he and rookie wideout Keon Coleman get tangled up along the left sideline, but that is perfect stack technique used by a veteran who's lost a couple of steps to deny the receiver to detach vertically. Coleman actually is the one pushing off, the defender doesn't pull him down along with him or anything like that, and they give Buffalo first and goal when they would have otherwise had to attempt a long field goal. They scored a touchdown, and now it's 21-10 heading into halftime, instead of at worst 16-9, with Baltimore getting the ball back with over a minute left. To be fair, since this is more so me complaining about the refs in general than how they might have favored one side, there was a phantom holding call early on Bills left tackle Dion Dawkins that took away a completion and pushed him out of field goal range. Odafe Owe losing his footing rushing off the edge, the false is here that's getting pulled down by Dawkins. So let's say that evens things out, even if that literally was the only penalty all game against Buffalo. But man, this late hit out of bounds against Lamar really grinded my gears. And it's just so much worse after what we saw this weekend. Quarterback clearly steps out on his own will, Ed Oliver pulls him down from behind, and it's actually a hip drop tackle, which they tried to outlaw this offseason. The ref in the booth says he let him finish the play, a phrase they never freaking use, and I even tweeted out in that moment that I don't want to be the guy that says, if that was Mahomes. But dude, we see Pat literally bake guys at the sideline a day earlier, but then you don't protect Lamar in this scenario, when they just had a spokesperson from NFL officiating defend all of the calls where they supposedly were correct on that same day on game day morning. That is just indefensible. Let's be real here. Even if Andrews converts a 2-pointer, Buffalo gets the ball back with 90 seconds and just need a field goal to win this. So in no way did this single-handedly decide the game, but it did obviously cost the Ravens a chance to go to Kansas City, and that's what sucks in such a battle of giants facing off against one another. Love what Buffalo has done all season, give Sean McDermott and the coaching staff credit for the game plan, where it was a lot of ball control and avoiding potential mistakes on offense, with the O-line really kind of pushing back that stout Ravens defensive front, coming after Lamar with an atypical rate of blitzes to force a couple of turnovers, considering he otherwise had all the time in the world back there in the pocket, with the way he's moving around and manipulating rush angles, along with not allowing Derrick Henry to get going until the second half. Josh deserves to get a ring, and I can't wait to see yet another rematch against Mahomes and company at Arrowhead on Sunday. But I think we all didn't want this thing to end the way it did, but to go to overtime and a great individual play to make the difference, that's all. Nonetheless, it was a really entertaining, dramatic, even if at times chaotic weekend. I hope everybody enjoyed the games, and we get even better ones in the conference championships. As I already mentioned, I'll preview Super Bowl 59 in detail when we actually have the matchup. Thank you so much for watching in the meantime. Definitely quite a different video to what I usually put out, but if you enjoyed listening to me vent a little bit, why don't you drop me a like and subscribe for more All-22 breakdowns as I usually focus on. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section. Did you enjoy the weather games? Do you think I'm completely off on some of my takes? Did anyone actually get screwed? I don't think so, but I'll happily exchange thoughts on all of those topics. I'm not sure if I'll actually have time for a full article next week, because the Eastward Shrine and Senior Bowl are coming up, and I have to do a lot of evaluating as I get into the practice footage, kind of the official kickoff for draft season, which I'll cover extensively, so don't go anywhere once the actual off-season rolls around. But I'll definitely make sure to share my picks for all the major NFL awards, such as MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, and more. You can check out all my content at HelloToFootballTalk.com, and feel free to follow me on social media for my thoughts on all kinds of stuff happening around the sport. Links for all of that are down below in the description. Looking forward to hearing from you guys soon. So until then, see you later. Peace!